Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving back into some entitled people stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who thought they could take, demand, and manipulate without consequences until the bill came due. Here we go. I tested their loyalty with a fake emergency. They failed. Goodbye. It starts pretty much the same as a lot of the other stories. Greg was the firstborn to young parents, not sure on their ages, but early 20s at the oldest, who at the start of his life didn't have much time for him. He was consistently at his grandparents' house. That's how we met. They lived close to us, and we would hang out all the time. When he was about 7, his parents had a girl named Jane, and right off the bat, they told everyone this was the makeup kid, the kid they were going to raise right. As they grew up, Greg was a solid student, had a great friend group, played sports growing up. We became good friends because we hung out in school and was always on my teams. I found out later in life that it's because my parents, being the good people they are, had actually paid for Greg to play some sports, and he was on my teams because that was the only way he could get to games. He started working at 16, saved up everything, went to college, then after completing college, transferred to university, where he majored in software engineering and met his girlfriend. Sarah graduated in chemical engineering. After school, they ended up getting good jobs and buying a condo. Jane, on the other hand, has been the typical spoiled child. She was barely passing high school when she needed to transfer after making false allegations that a teacher asked her on a date and she rejected him. That's why he failed her. She's gotten into multiple car accidents, completely writing off 3 cars, still lives at home at the time of this story. She would have been 22. And their parents have paid for everything for her, from new computers to cars to fast food and vacations. What led up to this is for a couple years after Greg and Sarah had moved in together, Greg's parents would consistently ask him for loans. Being the bit of a pushover he is, he would often give them a few hundred here and there. Then a couple times it would be as much as a few grand. It was a constant fight between him and Sarah. The cycle would be his parents would ask, he would give and not tell Sarah. Sarah would find out and yell at him. He would try to stand up to his parents. Parents would give him the family helps family when times are tough or blood is thicker than water lines, even though himself and Sarah knew it was because they were giving so much to his sister. Then something happened. Greg and Sarah found out that they were expecting their first child. This is where something must have clicked for Greg, and he realized that he now has a family he has to worry about. We were at the bar when this seemed to finally click in for him. It was fun to watch. He'd already thought about cutting off his parents. This kind of made the decision for him, knowing he didn't want people like that in his kid's life. So with Sarah's approval, he decided to test their family should always help out family line in a pretty fun way. Well, in my opinion. He also wanted to see if he could get back at least some of the money he'd given them. The two of them started looking for a house once they found out she was expecting. Found a place they liked and their offer was accepted. Once they had all the closing dates and information signed off, he called his parents. He told his parents he'd lost his job and was on the verge of being homeless. He needed to come up with $5,000 or he would lose his condo and him and Sarah would be homeless. Of course, the excuses started to come out as to why they couldn't help him. If he's man enough to play house, he should be able to stand on his own 2 feet. I saw some of the messages. It was like a sports interview with all the greatest hits. Greg expected all this, and he took it all well. To be honest, if his parents had given him the money, it probably would have been a far more interesting story. There it is. The family helps family line only works one way. When Greg needed help, suddenly he's supposed to stand on his own 2 feet. They used that phrase for years to pull money out of him, but the moment the roles reversed, it's crickets. The greatest hits collection of excuses. He got exactly the answer he needed to walk away clean. Sure enough, the closing day approached. He tried a couple more times, reaching out to his parents, dropping the number he needed all the way down to a couple hundred, and still no help. On the closing day, a bunch of us helped him move. His parents knew the date. He had told them he needed the money by such a date multiple times, or he was going to lose the condo, and no one showed up to check on him, not even a phone call. After the move, he stopped messaging his parents altogether. He didn't block them because he was curious how long before anyone said anything. It took about 2 months. In that time, he got engaged. When he got a confused message from his dad saying they tried to drop by his condo, probably needed something and there was someone else living in his place, he simply replied, "Thank you for showing me how much family helps family when times are tough. I hope Jane shows you the same support you show me when the time comes. From Greg, Sarah, my fiance, and soon-to-be daughter." Then he blocked them, and he hasn't reached out to them since. There's a comment I've seen somewhere that says something along the lines of, if you ever want to not see someone again, just ask them for money. And our second story. My GM cut staff meals, split my shifts, and tried to pay me less to wash dishes on my day off. I spent a good chunk of my life working as a cook, and the last kitchen I called home was a beautiful little farm-to-table Italian place tucked into a renovated brick building downtown. The owners were fantastic people. I'd worked for them before at a different restaurant, and when they decided to open this new concept, I followed without hesitation. 2 weeks of paid vacation and health insurance in the restaurant industry felt like winning the lottery, and I actually believe we were building something special. The general manager, however, was an entirely different story. Let's call her Carla. If the owners were warm, generous, and genuinely passionate about food, Carla was cold, arithmetic in human form. Every ounce of joy in that place had to pass through a calculator first. When we opened, there was a promise. Before every dinner service, we'd have family meal, nothing extravagant, a simple salad and a big bowl of pasta for the staff, something to keep the team fueled through a busy shift. At first, it worked exactly as advertised. We'd gather around a stainless prep table, eat together, laugh a little, and then roll into service ready to fight. Then the salad disappeared. Produce costs are high this week, Carla said. Then the meat vanished from the pasta. Margins are tight. Eventually, even the plain pasta quietly evaporated without a word. No replacement, no meal allowance, just gone. I remember one Saturday where I worked open to close, a double shift that started before noon and ended close to midnight. At some point in the late afternoon, I leaned against the walk-in cooler, unwrapped a Cliff Bar from my apron pocket, and ate it like it was a gourmet tasting menu. That was my fuel for 12 hours of sautéing, plating, and sweating under heat lamps. That's the image that gets me. A farm-to-table Italian place built on food and hospitality, and the cook's eating a granola bar in the walk-in because the GM won't let staff have a proper meal. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so sad. Carla's penny pinching wasn't subtle. It was aggressive. If a server rang in the wrong dish or a cook fired the wrong ticket, whoever made the mistake was expected to buy it. "You waste it, you pay for it," she'd say. One afternoon, I accidentally made an extra porcini rigatoni because of a misread ticket. It was an honest mistake. I shrugged and moved to toss it in the staff window so someone could eat it before it died under the heat lamp. Carla swooped in like a hawk. "Who's paying for that?" she demanded. "I'm not," I replied. "Mistakes happen." She stared at me like I just insulted her ancestry. The assistant GM, Mike, quietly stepped forward and said, "I'll cover it." He shot me a look that said, "Don't escalate this," and handed over his card. It was absurd, but that was how it worked. As business fluctuated, hours started getting cut. Staff got let go. The kitchen ran leaner and meaner every week. At one point, I was given split shifts twice a week. I'd come in at 10 in the morning, work through lunch, leave around 3, then return at 5 for dinner. I hated split shifts with a passion, but I needed the money, so I played along. The silver lining was that 2-hour gap. I could go home, eat real food, maybe sit down for 15 minutes without someone shouting "behind" in my ear. It became routine. Then one Wednesday, lunch exploded out of nowhere. We got slammed. Tickets stacked up like a Vegas blackjack dealer was on a heater. By 3 o'clock, we were still buried in prep and behind on dinner missing place. Carla came to me while I was breaking down my station. "Can you stay and help prep for dinner?" "I've got my split," I said. "That's when I eat." She crossed her arms. "We really need you." "I'll stay," I replied, "if I can grab a proper meal. Pasta with some protein. Nothing wild." Her lips tightened. "We can't comp that." I blinked at her. "Then I can't stay." The silence that followed was thick enough to slice. She clearly wasn't used to being told no. Mike looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "So you're just leaving?" she asked. "Yes," I said evenly. "I'll be back for my scheduled dinner shift." And I left. I went home, ate an actual meal, took a breath, and returned 2 hours later with a full stomach and zero guilt. Dinner was packed. I worked my station flawlessly. Nobody mentioned it again, but my split shifts quietly disappeared from the schedule a couple of weeks later. The final straw came on a Thursday. I had the night off unexpectedly, but I got a call mid-afternoon. "Hey," Mike said, "can you come wash dishes tonight? We're short." I needed the cash. I'd washed dishes plenty of times before at my normal rate without complaint. "Sure," I said. I showed up, tied on an apron, and went to clock in. Carla stopped me. "Make sure you clock in under dish," she said. I looked at the screen. There was a brand new button labeled dish. "Is that my normal rate?" I asked. "It's a couple dollars less," she replied casually. I stared at her. "You want me to come in on my day off and you're paying me less?" "That's the dish rate," she said. "That's how it works." For a second, I genuinely considered walking straight back out the door. The only reason I didn't was because I knew the line cooks would drown without someone on the pit. So I swallowed my anger and clocked in under dish. An hour into the shift, Mike came over awkwardly. "I can probably give you some scraps," he said. I shook my head, no. And then I remembered something. The dish position technically came with a free meal. No one ever claimed it because most dishwashers were part-time kids who didn't know or were too intimidated to ask. I walked over to Mike. "I'd like my dish meal." He blinked. "Your what?" "Dish gets a free meal," I said calmly. "I'd like the pork rigatoni with peppers." "Who's paying for that?" he whispered, glancing toward Carla. "It's included," I replied. "Dish benefit." He hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes later, a beautiful bowl of pork rigatoni landed in front of me. I took it to a corner table, sat down, and ate slowly. Every bite tasted better than the last. My coworkers smirked as they passed by. Carla refused to look in my direction. When I finished, I washed my bowl, went back to the pit, and powered through the rest of the night without complaint. The next time I clocked in, the dish button was gone. I was back to my regular rate, no matter what position I worked. Nobody announced it. Nobody explained it. It simply disappeared. I stayed a little longer after that, mostly out of loyalty to the owners. Eventually, I moved on to something steadier, but I still think about that pasta sometimes, the way it felt to sit down mid-shift, legally entitled to that plate, and enjoyed it while the GM pretended I didn't exist. Restaurants run on thin margins, sure, but they also run on people. And sometimes the smallest line in the handbook, "Dish gets a free meal," can taste sweeter than any promotion. And our last story. My ex-wife cheated, lost the divorce, then forged my signature. I'll start by saying my ex-wife doesn't just burn bridges, she salts the earth afterward and files paperwork about it. We've been divorced since right before the pandemic, and the entire split was a 5-alarm disaster from the moment I found out she'd been cheating. Not once, not just one mistake, 3 different men over 2 of our 5 married years. And the final one got her pregnant. D-Day came courtesy of her first affair partner, who apparently decided he didn't want to be the only one living in the dark. After that, it was the usual greatest hits, sobbing apologies, "I love you, it was just once," then slowly escalating admissions until I learned the truth had been running 2 full years. Gaslighting followed, then rage, then the promise that she'd take me for everything. We live in an at-fault state. That little detail ended up mattering a lot. She cheated, so alimony wasn't happening. We didn't contribute equally to the house either, so when we sold, the equity split 70-30 in my favor. I used my share to put a down payment on a smaller house closer to my job. She showed up at that house once. I didn't let her inside. "You financially ruined me," she yelled from my porch. "This was supposed to be your life falling apart, not mine." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You were ready to scorch the earth on me," I said. Turns out karma got there first. She threatened to sue me. I told her to go ahead. Then she said she'd tell everyone I abused her. That's when I calmly informed her I was recording the entire conversation and would sue for defamation if she tried. Her face went blank in that wide-eyed, stunned way that says someone just realized they stepped in their own trap. She left screaming. I haven't seen her since. Then came the HOA. When I bought my house, I made sure through a real estate attorney that I wasn't legally required to join the neighborhood HOA. The previous owner hadn't been a member and the property wasn't encumbered. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The HOA president, a woman who clearly believed she ruled with divine authority, showed up weekly with forms, "You need to sign these," she'd say, holding them like commandments. "I'm not required to join," I'd reply. She threatened court. I had my lawyer send a cease and desist. That shut down the door knocking, but it didn't stop the harassment. Suddenly, city inspectors were randomly checking my property. They found nothing wrong. One even accepted a burger from my grill while I was cooking on a Saturday afternoon. The HOA hated that I grilled. They hated that I hosted friends without asking permission. They hated that my neighbors actually liked coming over. I had the police called on me multiple times for noise complaints during daylight hours. Once I caught the HOA president creeping near my windows. I called the police. She denied it. So I installed cameras. Then the fines started. I began receiving letters saying I owed membership dues and penalties. When I called, their representative calmly informed me I was a registered member and had been for months. They emailed scanned copies of the signed enrollment forms. The signature looked like mine at a glance, but it wasn't. I knew that handwriting immediately. My ex-wife. She'd called the HOA, requested forms, forged my signature, and mailed them back. It was a sloppy imitation. Similar strokes, but inconsistent. I hired a lawyer that same day. The HOA refused to back down. They kept stacking weekly fines and threatened to put a lien on my house. 7 months later, we ended up in court. The HOA president looked smug. My lawyer did not. He pointed out the inconsistencies in the signature. He asked how the HOA had verified my identity before accepting the forms. They hadn't. When pressed, the president admitted my ex-wife had requested the paperwork and mailed it back signed. She claimed she assumed I'd signed it. The judge blinked at her. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that a woman who does not live at this residence and is no longer married to the homeowner submitted paperwork on his behalf, and you thought that was valid?" She said yes. That was the moment the air left the room. My attorney counterclaimed for fraud and harassment. We presented records of the weekly fines, the harassment, the police calls, the trespassing incident. It wasn't subtle, it was a pattern. The court ruled in my favor. I was awarded damages for the harassment, about 10 grand after fees. The HOA had to pay my legal costs. The fraudulent membership was voided. The HOA president was removed from her position and fined personally for her actions. She sat there thinking she had power, thinking the forms made her right. The judge asked one question and the whole thing collapsed. No identity check, no verification, just a woman with a grudge and a clipboard assuming nobody would question it. The air leaving the room? That was her authority evaporating. I've seen her outside a few times. She looks at me like I'm the villain in her origin story. As for my ex, I considered pursuing criminal charges for forgery. Unfortunately, not long after mailing those forms, she left the country to join her third affair partner somewhere in Europe. Her social media went quiet shortly after. Unless she sets foot back in the U.S., that door stays closed. The HOA under new leadership has been civil. No more letters. I grill when I want. I host friends. The neighborhood kids wave when I'm outside. Was it worth the 7 months of stress? Probably not. It was exhausting and expensive and unnecessary, but the forged signatures backfired in spectacular fashion, and the woman who tried to force her little kingdom onto me lost her throne over it. In the end, I was the one who signed the check she never expected. Let's talk about who really won. Story 1 was the gift of clarity. Greg could have spent years wondering if his parents actually loved him or just needed his wallet. Instead, he asked for help once, and they showed him exactly who they were. Story 2 was small victories in a small kitchen. Carla cut meals, split shifts, and tried to pay less for the same work, but she forgot one line in the handbook. Dish gets a free meal. But story 3 wins, not because of the money, though 10 grand in damages is nice, but because of the stack. The ex-wife cheated, lost the divorce, forged his signature, and fled the country. The HOA president backed a fraudulent membership, stacked fines for months, and ended up removed from her position and fined personally. 2 people who thought they could manipulate the system got burned by the same fire. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.